Cool.
Thank you.
Cool bunch of ladies.
Right.
Yeah, well, we'll get started. Thanks you all for being here. We're gonna kick things off with just like a light round of intros, a little bit about ourselves. So my name is Leigh Rondon-Davis. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a performer, director, and dramaturg here in the Bay Area. I'm also an anti-racist facilitator, an educator, and an arts administrator. So wearing a lot of hats within theater.
Thanks, Leigh. Hi, I'm Amissa Miller, she, her pronouns. I am a dramaturg, sometime playwright, sometime director, always educator in various capacities and spaces, and really just someone who's interested in how art can help us to get free. So that's really what I'm always trying to do.
Hi, I'm Edna Mirarea. I'm a clown first, mime second, then director, dramaturg, activist, editor, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. She, her pronouns.
I'm Victoria Erville, she, her pronouns, writer, director, dramaturg, administrator, educator, mom, all of that.
Well, thanks y'all for being a part of this. Thanks y'all for being here. I think we'll talk a little bit about like sort of our understanding of like Three Girls Intention and like how this all sort of came to be. Three Girls really beautifully centers BIPOC and artists of marginalized identities, particularly playwrights. They do a lot of new work development. And in that supporting of new work and development of new work, they realized that there were a lot of dramaturgs that could support, right? And so really wonderfully out of that, wanting to create opportunities for artists to work and support themselves, but also to support plays and other amazing artists. They created this workshop that Amissa and I both facilitated to help cultivate a new cohort of BIPOC identified dramaturgs and femme and women identified dramaturgs specifically. And that was a really beautiful experience. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the workshop?
Sure. So we had 3 sessions over the course of a few weeks. An initial session that was sort of about, okay, what is dramaturgy actually? Because I think there are a lot of folks, even who work in the theater, who if you ask them to define it, might not necessarily be able to say, oh yeah, I totally know what that actually means on a practical level. So sort of thinking about what is dramaturgy, what are maybe some of the traditional models that we might be taught about what a dramaturg is supposed to be. How might we develop alternative models that feel like they are better suited to us and the communities that we work with? Leigh led a session sort of going through almost like a case study of a play that they had worked on as a dramaturg, taking a look at initial drafts of scenes and then what the scene actually looked like, taking a look at Leigh's notes, thinking a lot about the actual work of working with the playwright. And then we spent some time sort of thinking about the other things that dramaturgs do to support a production, like how do you lead a post-show? How do you craft a post-show that actually aligns with the goals of the writer and the theater? How do you decolonize the feedback process, right? Which I know is something that Leigh has termed as sort of decolonized share-outs, right? So it was incredible. I think we all left really feeling like, okay, this is something that we are demystifying and democratizing and that all of us can access, whether or not we have allowed ourselves to take on that title, right? So it was a really wonderful process, and I'm so glad that Three Girls Theater came to us and asked us to do it.
And gave us the resources and the space to do it too.
Really
and I think it was like it was beautiful for so many reasons, because there was this opportunity for skill sharing, not just from Amissa and I, who have worked as dramaturgs before, but even amongst this cohort of like new and emerging dramaturgs, being able to share their experiences and what they've learned with one another. Also create community, right? I was talking about this earlier, but I get so many asks to dramaturg something or consult on something more asks than I actually have time for, and it was so great to be like, oh, I now can add to the list of other folks to recommend, or people to like go to first, you know, I can be the backup. And I think, you know, we'll speak more to this later, but sort of removing that gatekeeping, removing that like proprietary nature, that sort of, what am I thinking? Individualist sort of idea of like, I need to hoard all the opportunities and connections to myself. Like I would love to not get as many emails because it just means there's a bunch of brilliant dramaturgs running around. And so there were so many gifts and benefits from doing that program. And then I think all of those dramaturgs, correct, Pamela, went on to dramaturg a piece that Three Girls was producing or developing over the course of the 2022 season, which is exciting. And I think that's another really important part of supporting emerging artists and supporting up-and-coming dramaturgs is not only giving them the skills and knowledge, but also giving them the opportunities to practice, to learn, to grow, to meet people, right? And so I can't speak more highly of the program and my gratitude for Three Girls and putting that all together. We just talked at length. I would love to pass the mic to you both. And I think what's really exciting is that there are so many disciplines and skills and roles that are being held by the folks on this stage. So would you both like to speak about your experiences as playwrights, as dramaturgs, as art makers?
Did you see how that happened? So I came into theater as a writer initially, and then I wasn't very good actually. I never finished anything, started lots of stuff. But my entry into being a dramaturg was another writer actually asked me to look at her play. And I found that was just so liberating for me. Because I could look at a play and look at the structure and find out from her what she needed, you know, so that I was just as a support. You know, I'm here to support you to get what you want out of this play, and to make the play the best play it can possibly be. And because I had acting experience also, I was able to say, okay, well, I know about objectives and things that sometimes you sit in a writing group and they're not actors at all, and they have written this wonderful play, and because they aren't directors or producers, they have things coming from the sky, and, and you're like, ooh, well, that sounds great, but who's gonna do that? You know, or they've got 30 people, and you know, you're like, well, do they all need to be there? You know, but my ability or the fun part of dramaturg work for me has just been, it makes me a better writer, actually. It really helps me to see my own work while I'm looking at other people's work. Am I making the same kinds of errors? Am I not killing my darlings like I should be? You know, so when Pamela asked me if I would dramaturg Misha's play, I was really excited to be able to have the opportunity, because as I had mentioned backstage, it's like I had been doing some of this work without knowing what I was calling it. I just hadn't given it a name. So when I had been in other theater companies and they were calling it study guides, now I'm like, you really should have paid me for that. you know, this is like, wait a minute. But it's been an exciting journey, and something that I feel like that I can only grow in and only learn from. You know, and it's also really been a gift, because it does help to build a community. And I feel that's, you know, I left the theater for a while, raised a kid, although he doesn't seem to be raised. But, okay. He's kind of raised. And so now I'm kind of getting back into the theater, and it's such a wonderful family of people, and everybody can be so supportive. And so all these other jobs that we all do and we pick up, and we just are there to help lift each other up. And as a person of color, to be able to do that for other writers and help them tell stories that go beyond what we want to, you know, what we normally kind of see, and to be able to help them to just to reach different audiences and to look at the audience and see themselves in that audience. I'm all about like building new audience people. So yeah, I feel like it's just been a gift for me. So I'm not gonna say anything else now.
Wow. Oh, that was so good. I'm not as eloquent.
That's why you should have gone first.
Model, but now I'm gonna get lost. I just go on tangents. I started wanting to be a director in theater, so I went to USF and I was trying to be a director. They didn't have a directing program, so I kind of crafted my own. I've always just tried to like not be part of the pigeonholes. And I adapted a play by David St. John, who was a drama teacher or professor at UCLA. And it was called The Face, and it was like a monumental task. I had to get rights and everything, so that's where I started. And then after USF, I moved on to comedy. It was a completely different zone, and then I just focused on comedy, started writing my own characters and stuff, and then I got into filmmaking, and fast forward like improv and sketch and all this stuff, clowning, mime, video stuff. I stumbled upon Three Girls Theater, wanted to be part of it, and eventually Tina Delia asked me to be part of, to do dramaturgy, which I had never even considered because I thought it was just something that you had to go to school for, and I was like, I didn't study this in school, I didn't think it was like accessible to me. I thought I wasn't smart enough, and that I didn't have the skills, even though I had been doing theater all this time, and I had a very well-rounded understanding of everything that worked on stage, backstage, doing tech, I like knew all the elements, and for some reason I was like, but dramaturgy, no. So that was interesting. Just to even say yes to that was a challenge for me. I asked people, what does dramaturgy even mean? And do I have what it takes, and can I? And of course I could, because I've been writing all this time and I know how it works. I just didn't understand. I thought it was like more of a research role, and that I had to like really dig in deep and research, and of course you do part of that, but what I really enjoyed about the first one was the challenge of converting a movie to a play, which I had kind of already done with David St. John's novella, which was not originally a play. I like converted that, so I already had an experience of converting a different medium to another medium. But I also really enjoyed that it was based in Latin roots, and I understood the text because it had Spanish in it, and I was like, oh, let me correct this. I think I know what this is, and I think we have like, similar upbringings, but mine was like a little bit different, and I think I was able to kind of like translate more. Some people who don't grow up speaking Spanish have a less understanding of how the language works sometimes, and when they put it to writing, it's a little different. So I felt like knowledgeable, and that was like, oh, I know what I'm doing, what? So that was cool, and it was kind of a blessing that Tina even considered me, because it's not something that I would have pursued myself. Yeah, and I just found a lot of joy in it, and now I'm working with another Latina playwright who is a clown as well, and that's my training. So now we've got that in common, and I just love, Nicole Deminesis was the first one I worked with, and then, and that was cool because sorry to jump around, because there were so many like film montages that I was able to go like, let's like stretch this out and make it a scene, and that was cool. And now with Marcia Aguilar, she's writing this amazing play, and she, like every time we meet, there's a new discovery. I love that because I'm able to go like, what if, question, just posing this, let's say this character actually was also this character and this meant that, and she's like, I know, yeah. And then, it's just like these lovely little discoveries, and I feel like I really connect with what she's talking about, and it's a hard process because it's so personal this time. And we kind of went through this like therapy session recently together where I kind of helped her pull away from it so that it wasn't so harsh. And that's really important too. And so there's just so many levels to being a dramaturg that you don't really know are going to be there until they're there, right? We were talking about that earlier backstage. Okay, I'm done.
I so appreciated the way that you gave some examples of the work that you've done and some moments that have felt really like fulfilling and resonant and affirming. And I'm curious, Victoria, if you want to speak to some of those like beautiful moments or successes that you've seen in your experience, either as a playwright or as a dramaturg.
Sure. So as a dramaturg, I would say in one of the plays, it's kind of like a whodunit play, and for me, I always watch those type of movies, and I always know who did it. And I'm like, as soon as I turn it on, I'm like, okay, they did it. It's got to be that person. Oh, and they've got to do that. You know, and it's like, it sucks, right? Because you really want that suspense. And so I'm helping the writer to find that, you know, that the guilty party, but making it a little bit more obvious. You know, but not to the audience, but, you know, just having, so that was kind of, it was just fun, you know, just to find, and it was really fun for her to watch her kind of come alive as a writer too, you know, because sometimes it can be so limiting, and then you've got this idea in your mind, and sometimes you don't always see what else is out there or what else is possible, because then you've got the little 3x5 cards that say that in scene 4, this is supposed to happen. And sometimes that's really very limiting, you know, and I know that you can be really creative in a limited space, and that sometimes that's the best way to go, but in other cases, you have to just be willing to be open, and in a way it was almost like going to therapy, like you were saying, because sometimes you have to really look at, well, why am I not wanting to take that chance with the character? And so that was really rewarding. And then as a writer, it was really nice to have a person of color as a dramaturg for myself. Because I had been in these various writing groups before where I was only person of color. And I was saying backstage that I had written a scene where in The Lies That Bind, which was one of the first plays I did with 3 girls. There's this story is this young man, he's grown up, he left home, he had been abused at one point by his father, and he comes back after years, he's now a successful doctor, but he's ready to confront his life. And so he comes in the door, and all the people that had been in this work group with me, they're all like, well, he should just tell him right away that he's been abused. And, you know, and I'm like, well, you are not in a black family, because that would never, ever work. You do not go into your mother's home and then just like tell her, hey, you know, you were a horrible mom. You know, nice to see you after 20 years. You know, what do you have to eat? You know, so that just wouldn't work. And so it took me working with someone else that, you know, a person of color, to be able to help me find kind of the moments in that play. You know, because it did need to pick up its pace, but that wasn't the way to pick it up. And so having a dramaturg to work with who was of color was able to help me look at the scene and then figure out, you know, ways to kind of condense some of the action so that it kind of happened quicker, but it didn't take away from the rituals of life in a black family. Yeah, so that was it.
I mean, you started to lead into this around the like, oh, it's really important to have that like cultural specificity in the room, or someone that understands the you know, even if it's their own unique experience, but like a more broad lived experience of a community or of an identity, right? And we're not making a monolith out of them by any means, but I think there are some shared cultural norms that vary from family to family, but you know, what you were speaking to. And I'm curious if, like, what are some of the challenges y'all have experienced? And Amissa, feel free to jump in too, but like as playwrights working with dramaturgs or as a dramaturg in a process?
This time you go first.
I feel like I already talked about mine. I think with any adaptation, you struggle with not wanting to take over and thinking like, we were talking about this backstage, like, am I overstepping? Am I actually fulfilling the vision of the playwright, or am I making this something that it's not supposed to be? You don't want to like take it too far in a different direction, so it's like, it's kind of a dance, like, how's this feel? Oh, okay, we can step back, that's okay. It's just more of like, hey, here's a suggestion for an edit. How do you feel about that? And then it becomes sort of like a discussion. And then you can give a little bit of pushback, but if you don't get the response that you were looking for or hoping for, you just have to learn to like step off, maybe return at a later date when it's not as sensitive. I think it's more just like personalities and just learning how to talk to different kinds of people. That also happened with my adaptation of the David St. John piece. It was like, can I use this and can I put it in this way? And he was like, well, here's how I feel about that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm like 21, so whatever you want. So for me, there was no pushback. I was like, okay, cleared, no scene 8, got it, whatever it was. But now I'm more comfortable with saying like, okay, well, we'll come back to that, and then I make a note for myself, like, definitely come back to that. I think, those are just mainly the challenges. And then again, like I said, adapting like film to play is like a totally different experience, because things are so much faster when like a filmmaker thinks of edits, right? Oh, well, quick cut here, and I'm like, on stage? Like, how are we gonna do that? Quick cut? Like, there's a whole team that has to come in and like roll the whole stage around to make it like, now we're somewhere else. So like, let's think about how that really flows. Those have been my experiences and challenges.
So, for me as a writer, the one beautiful thing working with the dramaturg had been, as a writer, I don't care. I'll say it this way. I mean, I don't have. I just want the best for the play. So I leave my ego at the door. I do not have an ego as a writer. Not that I don't want to win a Tony, but I do. But I don't have the like, oh no, I'm in love with this scene, I can't get rid of it, or I'm in love with this character, I can't get rid of it. It's like, so I always want to work with a dramaturg who is comfortable telling me, hey, that doesn't work. And when I worked with people who were not in a similar situation, like they weren't Black, or a person of color, they sometimes tiptoe around that. They don't feel comfortable saying it to, as much. And so I don't feel like I get the most out of them, because they're not aware of the cultural differences in some cases. They don't feel comfortable saying, well, if that doesn't, is that true? Does it work? It's not something that they would know to say. Whereas when I was working with Tamika, she's like, oh girl, that, no. And I'm like, okay. She's like, just stop. just stop. I was like, okay. But I was good with that. I wanted that, because I wanted somebody who's just going to put me down and say, Victoria, you've written enough. She's more than said it twice. I've seen that scene. You don't need to do it again, right? Just, so it's like, okay, fine. So to me, the dramaturg relationship that you have between the writer and the dramaturg is just, it is like therapy. It's like having a therapist in the room with a pen and a marker that says delete, delete, delete. So now, and then working on the other end, just being able to, like you were saying, pull back, know when to let it go, but just marking it, like dog-earing the page and saying, we'll come back to that. You're not ready yet, but we're still, I can't let you just, I know it's sensitive, but we're gonna talk about it later.
Just to affirm that I've heard that same sentiment expressed by other Black playwrights. The experience you named of feeling like white dramaturgs will tiptoe around conversations about their work, that they can't actually get feedback that's useful for them because, and you know, good, well-meaning, anti-racist white folks, right? Like, but who may feel some discomfort around saying,
Right.
this I don't understand,
Right.
this is not working. And so what disservice are we doing to artists of color if, you know, white folks who are producing or presenting their work don't feel comfortable to like engage with it seriously, right? Like, to really like bring actual critique to the work. And so I just wanted to affirm that that's actually something that I've heard more than one Black playwright say the same thing to me, of how they had worked on a play, they had gotten feedback from folks, but then when they actually sat down with me and I talked with them about the play, they were like, oh wait, wow, this is actually something I can work with. This is actually useful, because it seems like everyone else is like, this is so great, we love it, it's so great.
Right.
Which it is.
And it's exactly what you're
And
just saying.
also,
How come nobody told me that?
how come no one is, right? And so there is that sense of like, oh my gosh, I've just been out here this whole time and no one is willing to tell me the truth about what, you know, what is or is not working, what is or is not confusing, right? And so one of the things that I think is so important about this work of resourcing more artists of color to step into that role, into that collaborative space, is because like we need to do right by our writers. You know, we really need to do right by our writers of color, and there are certain ways in which I think dramaturgs of color are just better prepared to enter into that negotiating. You use the word therapy, which I think is so interesting, right? But like, it's tender, right? Like we're putting ourselves out there, and to step into that space with shared foundation and care, but also with like the willingness to tell each other the truth. It's delicate, right? It's a practice, but yeah, we have to do right by our writers. So yeah, I just wanted to confirm that.
And like by doing right by our writers, we're doing then right by all of the artists that are, you know, hired to work on the project, from actors to creative team. We're doing right by our audiences,
Yes.
the centered, like, you know, BIPOC communities, but also anyone that gets to engage the work. They're seeing it at its best, right? And I think something that you all are speaking to is that when there is shared experience or shared identity with someone, there is that kinship, that trust, that safety that comes in a world that is patriarchal, that is white supremacist, that is all of these capitalists and all of these things, right? So how can we arrive in a room together as a dramaturg and as a playwright, sort of on equal footing, with a shared understanding and like a shared heart space, and feeling the benefits of that, right? And I think, you know, something else that I was hearing is like sort of the spectrum of like, you know, when playwrights are asking for feedback, we have white folks that carry that self-awareness, like I am a white person, I don't have this lived experience, or like I do not have the experience of moving through the world in this way, and thus I don't want to overstep. But I've also experienced the other side of folks feeling like I know it all. Like I exist in the world and thus I know everything, and like come in with really prescriptive notes. I've had an artistic director tell a room of Latina artists, that's not what a honoraro looks like, and they're like, I'm sorry, who are you, sir, to tell me, you know, about my community? And like I'm watching this interaction happen, I'm like looking between all of these people, and I continuously am blown away by this moment, because one of them was like, that's so funny, because my father was a honorero, my uncles still are day laborers, and like, so I picked this photo because this is what my family looks like, and like to watch the man's reaction of like, you know, but like at least he got it. I'm gonna give him that, he got it. But you know, to like watch that interaction of like, I presume to know about this culture, this identity, this experience, simply because I passively see it or, you know, share space with it in the world, is also harmful, right? And I think speaks to the need for more, like just a wider, not even just BIPOC dramaturgs, but dramaturgs that carry a wide variety of experiences, identities, intersectional identities and perspectives, right? To support all of the stories that are coming out and happening right now, and all of the artists and writers that are creating work in this moment, right?
Can I step in here
Yeah.
just to piggyback on that?
Yeah.
You had talked about us backstage that the original meaning of dramaturg came from this man.
Oh, sure,
Jeremy,
yeah.
can you tell that story?
Absolutely. So I did study dramaturgy in an academic environment. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. But one of the things I learned was that the first dramaturg, I guess, in the field, this dude named Lessing, it's dude named Lessing, right? It's like such sacrilege in like dramaturgy spaces to talk about him this flippantly. But so we're talking like 1780s Germany. He works at this theater company called the Hamburg Theater. He creates a job for himself as like the in-house critic. So he's helping them select plays for their seasons. He's giving feedback on the scripts. He's also like writing articles to sort of contextualize the plays for the audience. So a lot of the things that we think about when we think about dramaturgy now. But he really sort of positioned himself as like this word expert, right? Who walks around feeling like they have a claim to that title is interesting. So he sort of, positions himself as like the expert on the play in the room, right? Which is how I was taught, right? In the academic program that I was a part of, I was sort of taught in that model that when you step into the room as a dramaturg, you have to be the expert on the play and everything about the play in the room. Which is wild to think about. And even at the time, it didn't feel right to me, and it didn't feel like how I knew I wanted to be in relationship with artists and in collaborative work. But I think one of the things I've had to develop over the years, because I was like, well, this is not going to work for me. Like, if I step into every space feeling like I have to be the expert, like, what does that even mean for me? And is that even something I want? I would much rather that like all of us are collaboratively co-constructing knowledge about this play as we're creating it, and I can support that process. And I remember when I read Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy, which I highly recommend just to all humans, life-changing. One of the things that she writes about is this idea that there is a conversation that only this group of people in this moment, in this context, with this shared task in mind can find, and your job is to find that conversation. And when I read that, I was like, oh, I feel like that's actually what I do as a dramaturg, right? Like, it's not hierarchical. It's not about being the expert. It's not that sort of kind of individualistic way of thinking about this is my domain or my territory, but it is, okay, there is a way that this play comes to life that only this collection of people can make happen in this moment, in this context, and I'm trying to help us get to that place, because that's where the magic is. So how am I a facilitator of that process, a co-facilitator of that process, rather than feeling like, okay, I step in the room and I'm the expert, I'm the smartest, right? Like, because that model, that way of thinking, right, that's the reason why you felt like, well, I can't be a dramaturg, because I'm not that, I'm not this, right? But we all are. If we step outside of that, sort of, I would say, Euro-patriarchal way of thinking about that sort of role, and step more into like, what does it mean for us to just be in relationship with each other and this play, and to get to that place where like, we found the magic. We found the magic that only we can create. And that just feels better to me as like a person. It feels better to me in terms of how I want to be in relationship to people and to my communities and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, it's more of a collaborative effort.
absolutely. Yeah.
Which isn't that theater?
Yeah, I think in terms of like speaking to that imposter syndrome, that like not feeling smart enough, like the models that we have seen throughout theater history of dramaturgy has been positioned in such a way. And I think that there's also like very specific pipelines, like as I was telling you all backstage, I had never heard the word dramaturgy until like my sophomore or junior year of college. And I had been doing theater since I was 5, you know, and like doing theater both like recreationally and professionally. And like, and the way that came to be was like I was taking a playwriting class with a brilliant Latina playwright, and I turned in a 20-page script when it was supposed to be a minimum of 60 pages and a 40-page research binder, and I was like, combined, this is 60, and she was like,
So have you heard of dramaturgy?
like, not saying playwriting is not for you, but I do see like a lot of potential here. Like, this is clearly not a great start, but this is great. And like, what about this? And you know, I didn't continue to study it. I actually dropped out of college and don't have a degree, and was feeling like, oh, like I couldn't be a dramaturg. You need degrees to do that. You need special training to do that. And it was that professor, like that initial moment of affirming that in me and seeing that passion, that interest, those skills in me. I like didn't pursue it for a little while, and then like jumped in because someone was like, hey, we need to make this like wall of dramaturgy for a theater I was apprenticing at the time, the Magic Theater. And I was like, great, like, yeah, I'm gonna look up like the Philippines from the socio-political like climate in the Philippines from like 1940 to 1987, and like we're just diving in. And it was like, and it was so cool because, you know, I am not Pinoy at all, but my own lived experience as like an Afro-Caribbean, like a child of Afro-Caribbean immigrants, as someone who like feels deeply connected to like diasporic identity, I could bring that lens and like recognize like this is not my identity and this is not my story to tell, but I could bring that lens in and like, what is the food? What is the music? What is that? And you know, this wall we ended up creating was so much more than anyone anticipated. We're given one wall, and I was like, can we have all 4?
All the walls.
Exactly. And so, and people really like appreciated it. And I think I didn't think of myself as a dramaturg in that moment, but then they gave me like the assistant dramaturg credit because of all of this work that I had done. And like, that is what, like from that first seed in that playwriting class to that moment is what really like blossomed my dramaturgy career. And I think what was beautiful about this workshop is we sort of disrupted that academic pipeline of like you have to study it a certain way and learn the same books and that, and also then it resulted in paid opportunities right out of the workshop. And how can more of those models come to be, right? And how can we empower more folks to just like, if you have the skills and the interest, or you want to learn the skills, like you can be a dramaturg. And there's so many ways to approach it too. And I'm curious if like y'all have sort of any, I'm trying to figure out like if this is a thought in draft form, but like in thinking about that pipeline, either your experiences within that or like ways that you've seen that disrupt it.
For me, I have not tried to get a job as a dramaturg. Pamela hired me, and so and then another writer contacted me. They just knew me as a writer and said, hey, you know, you've always, whenever I've sent you my scripts in the past, and you've always come back with some insightful thoughts, and so would you be the dramaturg and we'll pay you? And I was like, oh, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So, you know, if all I'm doing is, you know, looking at that, I can do that. But, and then before that, of course, I had mentioned that I had done it without knowing I was doing it. So, but I do think that we're starting to see more writers of color just in general getting produced. Mm-hmm. And so I think that will open up more opportunities for dramaturgs. And I think it's a great transition if you're a writer to become a dramaturg. You know, just to, because I think you just keep learning. You're just going to learn. Every time you do it, you're going to learn more about yourself as well. I mean, so it's a win-win because you will just be a stronger writer having been a dramaturg. Mm-hmm. You know, just like if you act or direct, anything is going to make you a better writer, but definitely dramaturg, because you're really going to be looking at the whole picture and seeing how the whole story comes together. And when it's not your own work that you're looking at, you have the benefit of really definitely being objective. And so you can really say, oh, you know, wow, so I can really see that arc in the characters. Or I, you know, and you don't have that, oh, I love that character so much, I just want to let them get what they want. as opposed to saying, well, maybe they should have an obstacle. just for shits and giggles, you know. But anyway.
I think I'm disrupting it right now just by being a dramaturg now and putting it on my freaking resume and saying it out loud and being here in this panel and being like amongst you just feels good to me, and it also like is like a little pat on the back, like, yeah, you did it, now you have another credit. It's like getting one SAG credit, you're like, ah! But I'm also telling people about it, and people are going, what is dramaturgy again? And then I'm like, now I know what to answer, because I used to ask this very same question. So that's cool. I think I'm teaching people, and I'm telling my friends of color, like, I thought I couldn't do this, and now I'm doing it, which is encouraging them to maybe pursue it later. Yes, and that's ideal. So I just love that this exists, and I thank Three Girls Theater for bringing it to us. I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't go to the workshop. I would have loved to, but yeah, I would still go to another workshop if we did it. Yeah.
We're ready. Just call us, Pamela.
Yes, same here. I would go. I didn't go either, but I would go.
Well, I think that's you know, connected to what this panel is called, right? Representation, literally just seeing ourselves, right? And seeing other people doing the thing that you love doing that maybe you never thought you could do, right? And we often talk about that in like the stories that are being presented, or the actors brought in, the bodies, and telling these stories on stage. But it also comes back to like the creative teams and all the roles that one can hold in the collective like practice and ritual of making theater together, right? And I think, you know, something else we had talked about backstage is like scarcity and that tokenization, right? That happens. And so the more of us that there are, the just more incredible artists out here supporting incredible artists telling incredible stories, but then also allows us to like be our fullest selves, right? And say no to work that like doesn't, you were really speaking to this, so I'll keep it brief and like pass it off to you, but like saying no to work that like actually I may not be the best person suited for this, or like I think another type of dramaturg or another type of person could better support this work. And knowing that there are plenty other people that you can recommend or send their way, just you know, bolsters the whole theater like ecosystem, right?
Yeah. Yeah, right, because not every dramaturg is right for every play. And when there are so few of us, dramaturgs of color, like we get called on a lot, and I know you know what that's like.
Somebody knows.
And, you know, I think sometimes because we are all sort of embedded within this capitalist system that tells us we have to hoard opportunities for ourselves, right? There is this thing of like, well, okay, if they're reaching out to me, I guess I have to do this, I have to say yes to this. And, you know, it's a writer of color or a queer writer or whatever the case might be, and that's my identity, and so I guess, yes, I have to be the person. But not every play is going to resonate with us. Not every play benefits from us as much as it would benefit from someone who maybe brings a particular perspective or skill set. And there is a way in which, like, you named the tokenization part of it, like, when there are so few of us, I think that tokenization, like, it's there, it's happening, right? Like, whether or not a play is in my wheelhouse, just because it's a black writer, someone's like, well, Amissa's a black dramaturg, so yeah, that's a good fit. It's like, but is it? Or is it the case that I pass on this and I pass it off to my sibling, I pass it off to my sister, I pass it off to my artist friend, right? I pass it off so that we are collectively like sharing the work rather than feeling like, okay, I have to do everything that's offered to me, and whether or not I resonate with it, I have to do it because it's another artist of color or another queer artist or whatever the case might be. Yeah, the more of us there are, the more we all get to work on the things that really speak to us and create collaborative teams that are coming together, not solely based on identity, right? Like obviously identity is an important part of this, but it can't be the only reason why artists are put together. It can't be the only thing that connects folks. And I think there is such a danger when there are so few of us of that process happening, right? And I have been really trying to be better these days about saying no to things that don't like feel like they are resonant for me. And it's still hard, right? Like I still feel pressure. Yeah.
Well, especially because so many writers of color are not even used to getting a dramaturg. You know? I mean, there's just that whole other side of the story is that a lot of theaters don't even think to, or they just use their person that they already have. Yeah, whoever's on staff. And so they're not even necessarily looking to say, oh, we need to get a person of color to assist this writer. You know, so when they do, you feel bad about like saying no.
Right.
I think you're like naming the like resourcing of work by artists of marginalized identities. Like we have consistently been under-resourced in terms of like, you know, in the long legacy of theater making, and we're starting to see a shift. But you know, I know of playwrights that have to fight for me to be in the room or fight to get me paid what I'm worth. You know, that $100 stipend is not going to cover 40 hours of rehearsal and coming to tech and coming to previews and writing the article and blah blah blah. You know, and so we've had to all do a lot of advocacy on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of like our community, our fellow artists, on behalf of like our plays, our work, and I'm excited to see like what's next. Me too. We wanted to make space for questions if y'all have it. No pressure. Also, I have plenty more prepared in the can. But yeah.
I was intrigued. You were talking about decolonizing the process, and I am very curious if you can unpack that a little bit. Like, what is that? I know what it means. What does it look like?
Yeah. I mean, for me, decolonizing dramaturgy looks like acknowledging the work that has come before and all of the models and brilliant minds that I like have drawn from in order to create my own practice and like ethos around dramaturgy. That looks like approaching a work at like removing that expert mindset. Like I'm only an expert of my lived experience, and even that I'm not so expert in, right? And so like coming into a process with like an open heart and mind and like a spirit of generosity, and that like I cannot presume to know this play better than the playwright or this experience better than you know, the folks in the room. I think decolonizing is also what is it, like a
De-hierarchizing.
yeah, a de-hierarchizing, if it wasn't a word, it is freaking now, of all the collaborators in the room and helping to facilitate that. Like every voice and every perspective in the room is valuable and valued, and like it is my job as a dramaturg, even as a director, to take all of those ideas and help synthesize them or help sort of streamline them in a way that feels equitable, that in a way that feels intentional, and like heart forward. I think also being a decolonized dramaturg for me is also like putting people first at it, you know, like I'm not coming in like with the mind of like, I'm gonna make this play better, and like I know exactly how to do that. Like for me that looks like asking the playwrights and like questions and really understanding their intention and what they're hoping to do, or really understanding where this story is coming from, either from their own life or from their own spirit, and helping to support that. Whether or not it's like my aesthetic or something I fully, like fully resonates for me, but like the playwright comes first and the play comes first. Also, like for me, decolonizing dramaturgy has looked like using a lot of my other skills and hats to create a space that like is supportive of the humans involved. So like I have a background in trauma-informed care and rape crisis counseling and sexual health education. And so I use a lot of those skills as a dramaturg to just support the humans in the room. And so recently I worked on a project for NCTC where I was brought on as dramaturg, but we realized like the play deals with some really heavy subjects around childhood sexual abuse, about queer identity, about coming out, about being a young person of marginalized identities in a very conservative town. And they realize there's a need for the support for the actors in that space and having to step into that story and those identities every single night. And so for me, I was able to bring in all of these other skills, and so there is like a malleability to what a dramaturg is, and like within my bounds of consent and boundaries and my own self-care, but being able to bring in all of these other elements and allowing what a dramaturg meant to be more expansive. And so, I can't say, therapy kept coming up, and I'm like, I am so often a therapist as dramaturg, and I think that sometimes is what dramaturgs do, but also like I have that skill and experience and the passion to do so too. It is never an it rarely feels like an obligation. I should clarify. But yeah, and so I think it is like a more expansive thinking around what dramaturgy can be, and at the core of it, honor the legacy of those before and support the folks that are making the work happen now. So yeah.
Can I ask a question based on what you just said?
Yeah.
What does that look like when the balance between director and dramaturg in the room, when that therapy needs to happen? Is that like, are you bringing in exercises and going to the director and saying, suggestion exercise? Or are you just, like, what does that look like?
Do you mean in terms of, like who leads those kind of moments?
Yeah,
or
is it that you're bringing in an exercise, or is it that you're wanting to give like some context to the situation and trying to like have everyone come together and talk about it for a second? Yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, for that particular process, it was like coming in with sort of my normal dramaturgical packet about the world, the time period, the play, all of that good stuff. But then also, like I came equipped with like a lot of resources for anyone who was, either triggered or activated by the work or having to step into it. And then actually the director was really incredible. Richard Mosqueda, shout out to them, was like, this is something I don't know a lot about, and so I want to empower you. And so they took time out of rehearsal so that I could lead exercises with primarily the cast, but the whole creative team was invited in. Richard also participated, our stage managers participated, and like everyone was a participant in that. Like I did the exercises along with it. And I mean, that's been sort of a unique circumstance. But I often will go to a director and say like, hey, I've been noticing like this come up, or the fact that like I know how to, I have experience reading people, and I'm like, hey, I'm just finding that this actor seemed a little like closed off, like feel free to send them my way, or like, I might encourage you to do that. And so I can often be a little bit of like a consultant and like a whisper in the ear to not overstep.
Like an assistant director position.
Yeah, and because of my director experience, like, I like to set boundaries around like, what would you like me to weigh in on? Yeah. I don't want to overstep. Some of these notes are more directorial in nature, some of these notes are specifically about text, or this is, all of those things. And I think leading with that like open conversation about like, what boundaries do you have? How do you like to be communicated with? What do you want my eye on? Is always so useful, and allows people to like receive it, right? As opposed to me just being like coming in and telling them whatever I wanted to tell them, we open those lines of communication and build that trust together, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy to like offline. We can talk all about it. It's really fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, so I'm, one of the things that I'm so chuffed about with this conversation is the recognition of the emotional labour of the dramaturg. And I think that we, especially coming out of an academic setting, you have an idea of a dramaturg as a very analytical role. But when you're in the rehearsal room, and so I wanted to ask about, just to give us a little window into the ways in which both you, Leigh and Amissa, the ways in which you elicited and helped the dramaturgs in training to be aware that those things would come up and how you might navigate. And I think you just spoke to it a little bit about boundary setting and communication lines, but what are the other ways in which you can really help to be prepared for the emotional labour and then manage the emotional labour when it comes up?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, collected my thoughts.
I know, I'm like, who? Because I mean, I think you spoke to so much of it, but you know, the reality is that for me, it really, it was something I learned through doing, but I think it's also something that, in the same way that you sort of draw on your skills and that you've cultivated in other spaces, I draw so much on like the kind of educator that I want to be, and thinking about the emotional labor that I do in that space, which is also a lot. Which again is not something that we're really prepared for, I think, in academic training programs. But I think one of the ways that I have tried to prepare myself for that emotional labor stepping in, particularly because like I am someone who like I feel a lot of, you know, what's in a space. I pick up on a lot, it affects me a lot. And so I've had to come up with like, okay, what are the grounding and centering things that I can do for myself before I step into a space? So that I know that I'm stepping in and that I'm like, okay, like my feet are on the ground, like I am here, I am present, right? Like, but then also, right, is it a space where other folks are also committed to doing that themselves? Because that's not always the case. I've had many experiences where like, I'm really interested in how are we building trust? How are we communicating? You know, how are we sharing voice? How are we I forget the word. How are we doing that, right? You know, how are we being, when I can be interested in all of those things, and then coming into a space where like a director's not interested in those things. And there are dynamics happening in a space that don't feel aligned with those things that are important to me. And those have been the most challenging spaces for me to navigate, I think. It's really lovely when you have the experience of working with other collaborators who are like, yeah, we all are committed to these things. Let's practice together. Who else has resources or exercises or things that we can share? It's much harder when other folks in the space are not committed to that. And I think that's when I have to go back to thinking like, okay, how are we asking questions or offering, while recognizing that at a certain point, I have to have my own boundaries. And so really it is like, if you are going to do the work of offering that kind of support and care, I think you always have to be making sure that you're offering that support and care to yourself. Because if you're coming in and you're off and you're not grounded, and it's really hard, I think, to offer that to collaborators. And it's hard to do it in an environment that's not really prioritizing that. And then for me, it's been about, okay, how am I making sure that I'm offering that to myself in each moment, in each interaction. And sometimes when you model that, other people pick up on it, right? Like when you model certain ways of communicating, of asking questions rather than being prescriptive, people can pick up on that, right? And I've witnessed that too. I've witnessed how the ways in which I communicate and how I show up in a space that other people on a team will notice it and will say, I really appreciated how you did that, like, and will start trying it on themselves. So, I don't know, that felt like kind of rambly, but it's, yeah, it can be challenging. I'm not gonna lie, like, it can be challenging. There are really beautiful, lovely experiences that I've had, like the one that Leigh shared, and then there have been ones that have been harder.
Yeah, for me, it's like, it is something I'm still working on and I learned recently, but it's like, at the end of the day, you gotta protect your peace, right? And as, like, I'm a deeply empathetic person and I wanna support everyone through everything all the time. And I am learning how to set boundaries around that. I can still show up and be like a heart-forward person and still try and have as positive as an impact on the world and those around me, while also making sure that I am taking care of myself. And so I empower people, like, when you're feeling overwhelmed or like that's just too much, you can tag out, like, respectfully and thoughtfully and compassionately say, like, I'm so sorry you're going through that. I can't hold this for you right now, but let me see if there's someone else that can tag in. Let me send some resources your way. Because I don't think that the role of the dramaturg or it should be expected or assumed that a dramaturg will take on that emotional labor. I think, like, if you are willing to do it and if you are willing to lead it, like, awesome. Great. If you have the skills to do it, awesome. I also want to encourage folks that, like, if you don't have the skills to do that, like, take a step back. It's okay that you can say, I don't know, that I don't have the answers and I don't have the solutions and I actually don't have the skills to hold you in this, right? But I can give you all of my love and support you by bringing you food and just being a friendly face rather than the person that you, that helps hold your burden or your load. And I think, like, lines of consent, always checking in with one another around, like, hey, you know, even like trying to elicit the, like, something seems up, like, what's going on, like, using, like, consent forward practices around that, but also consent forward practices when you're seeking support or help, right? And I think a lot of contemporary work now is dealing with heavy stuff because the world's kind of a shitty place. Yes. And we're talking about our real lived experiences, like living under systemic oppression in all of its various forms. And so it's always likely that those things will come up because we draw so much from our own lives as theater makers and our own experiences. And so, you know, it's not unavoidable, but I think there are also, like, centering joy in a process. Like where are the ways that you can find joy and peace, like, to help you, you know, navigate that emotional labor? Like, and how can we also uplift stories that center joy and marginalized communities, like, thriving and experiencing bounty and love, you know? I think it all has to be a balance. And also, like, that too, like, I'm trying to be more intentional about the work that I take on, right? Like, oh, okay, I dove into this piece about, you know, childhood sexual abuse, about trauma, and there was a lot of pain, and it was a beautiful script, and I'm so grateful, but I was like, I'm gonna take a pause on that. I'm like, right now I'm about to jump into a process about, like, 2 young Black women, like, meeting and falling in love, and, like, in the 90s, and there's fun music, and, like, there's heavy stuff in the script, but it's a different experience because it's about joy and it's a romance, it's a love story, right? And so even just, like, balancing my year of work around what kind of stories I'm telling is also really important. And also noticing if you're getting called in for just that work. I realized for a long period of time, like, I was dealing with a lot of plays about sexual assault, about like the Black trauma, about the mistreatment of, like, women in femmes, particularly Black women, and I was like, oh, I understand why people reach out to me to engage in that work, but that's also not the only work I want to be doing. I'm honored to support it, but also I want to be able to access other pieces and be a part of telling
Where's
their
the
stories.
comedy?
Yeah, like put me on some ding dang Shakespeare. Come on, like, let me just dramaturg on 12th night and like have some fun. I don't know. But yeah, so you know, recognizing maybe when you're being typed or tokenized outright, and then being able to advocate for yourself or seek support in advocating for you and the stories you want to do. So yeah, often. Yeah. Maybe one last question before we sort of close it out. Yeah.
I just want to, like, this has been a totally inspiring conversation. I'm excited and thinking about new ideas really and sort of what's possible, and that's what I want to ask you about. I really appreciate how much you've emphasized the nurturing and emotional labor and support of work that comes out of dramaturgy, but I also think of dramaturgs as curators and in that way gatekeepers. And so as we like see this growth of more populations centered in dramaturgy, I just want to put it to you to sort of like tell me what the vision is, like what's possible with that, you know?
I love audience members like you. That segues perfectly into our last.
I mean, excited coming from you.
Yeah.
That question.
Yeah, and thank you for that beautiful framing too. Like, what is? I think I would love to like pass the mic around of like, what is our vision for the future of dramaturgy and theater? What I the questions that we had talked about before were like, what we need, what we can do, right? So I'm wondering if folks want to share some closing thoughts around that.
I just love that you talked about 12th Night and Shakespeare. Like, I'm not a Shakespeare person, but like, I don't think that I would ever be called to do a Shakespeare play as a dramaturg. It's just not a thing that I ever thought I would do, just like I never thought I'd be asked to be a dramaturg. But do you not get 12th Night calls because you're not white? Like, what is going on there? I'm like, oh, that's interesting, not something I usually think about, but like, do I want that? That might be something I might want, and what other opportunities are we missing out on because people don't think of us first? I would love to see us just represented in more ways. I love that we're all women up here. I mean, in college, I did see a lot of dramaturgs who were women, but they were always white for some reason. And I don't know. And like I was saying backstage to them, I felt like that was because it's a weird stigma of like, oh, well, they must have a master's because they could afford to go to school longer, and so they got to be educated in dramaturgy. I'm not told about it because I'm poor. I don't know. It's just this weird, like, classist thing that I felt was present, and it really wasn't. So, I don't know. I think just opening it up more and talking about it and seeing us on stage representing as dramaturgs will help facilitate that future.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, I think that I'd like to see dramaturgs of color be able to just do any play, not just limited to a certain play. Like, we only call you when we have this kind of a playwright, but it should be any playwright, because we can bring some flavor to almost anything, right? And then also to see dramaturgy as a reaching out to the audience as well as the people behind the stage. It's because the audience, a more informed audience will enjoy a play more than they will if they come in completely blind to a story. But if they have a little bit of background information, and if they feel comfortable asking questions, and there's someone that maybe, I go to a lot of theater, and you just don't see a lot of Black people or people of color in the audience still, right? There are times where I'm like counting the people, and saying, there's a couple over there, and there may be a lot of people on the stage, but they're still not in the audience. I'm trying to find out if there is ways that as that dramaturgs can help to facilitate and bring in that audience. You know, using our language as a way and our cultural backgrounds as a way to engage audiences so that they feel comfortable coming into the space of the theater. Because for so long, I think the theater was something that people just didn't think was for them. You know, and trying to make sure that we have opened that door for everyone to come through.
I feel like a big part for me is around that, like, just more opportunities and not being like pigeonholed or tokenized or typed in a way, right? I use 12th Night as an example. I don't have like a huge desire to do Shakespeare, but you know, even you know, plays that don't center like my own specific identities or aren't just are silly comedies or dramas that are not necessarily centered around identity, but more like the human experience, right? I'm a human being. I speak to those things, what it means to be in love, what it means to have complicated family dynamics, all of those things. Like, bring me in for a friggin' Shepherd play. I love me some Shepherd. Like, I would love to dramaturg some Shepherd, you know? And so I think that's a big part of it. I think, like, seeing dramaturgy like be a tool for liberation. When I wrote that down when you said it, and y'all also, so I'm gonna start just naming things that I was taking notes on that are not mine and giving full credit to this incredible group, but like dramaturgy as liberation as it's tied to shifting the theater landscape, stories, audiences, artists, right? All of those things are tied to one another and shape one another, right? Like dramaturgy being a catalyst for community and artists supporting and uplifting one another. Dramaturgy as an opportunity to affirm our knowledge, our skills, our experiences, and like allow it to like shine. You know, dramaturgy becoming a more standardized thing, as you were talking about. Not every play gets a dramaturg or the resources for a dramaturg, and how you named like the feedback and outside eyes actually makes the work better, right? Or the fact that like the more stories we tell for, by, and with our communities, the more our audiences are gonna start to look different, right? And I think, you know, some of the things that we had talked about earlier, dramaturgy is, or like the future of dramaturgy can be rejecting the hierarchy, de-hierarchicalization, and rejecting the idea, or like rejecting the positioning of the dramaturg as the expert. Like seeing dramaturgy value lived experience and subjectivity, right? And the questions and the unknowns. And like all of those things I think shape this really like beautiful future of what it can be. And like more opportunities that again disrupt the pipeline, yes. Right? That allow people to see themselves as dramaturgs, feel like, oh, I have all the skills and knowledge to do it, and then be able to jump in and start getting paid work, right? You know, you can't start calling yourself a dramaturg until, it feels like you can't start calling yourself a dramaturg until you start getting credits as a dramaturg, right? No one can call themselves a dramaturg if they want to. But like allowing more people to see themselves, to recognize the brilliance and potential in themselves and like step into the work. And all of those things came from this incredible group.
Thanks for reflecting that back.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was taking so much. I was like, I hope they don't think I'm weird. I'm taking so much. Learning so much. Yeah.
Smash the gate is what I say, right? You said gatekeeper, and I'm like, get rid of the gate, like, because like the gate is right the hierarchy. It is the elitism. It is the class barriers to access. Like it is all of these things, and if there, I have had the joy of working with so many first-time playwrights, right? People who maybe were poets or actors or, you know, other artistic practitioners, but who are venturing into the work of playwriting for the first time. And that is where I'm always just like, come on in. Yes. Like there is room, there is space. Like if you have a story to tell and you want to tell it in this medium, then you are a playwright and let's make a play. And so my vision for, I guess, a future in terms of where dramaturgy fits into it, it is like, how are we a part of smashing the gate, rather than being gatekeepers, is the best way that I guess I could phrase it. Smash the game.
Just
All of us together, we can knock it down.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel it like coming down,
Yeah.
pole by pole.
Theater activism.
Yay. Yes. Somebody said, well, 3GT, that's not an activist theatre. I was like, oh, I think that's not quite correct.
Interesting.
What makes you say that? That's an interesting, reaching out, horizontal. Yes, Katie.
Are there any resources that you can point an audience to if they're interested in becoming a dramaturg that helped you through your journey?
Ooh, that's such a
Great question.
You mentioned a book earlier.
emergent.
Oh, yeah. Yes, and that's just a resource, I think, for all of us as artists, as people who are interested in a liberated world. Adrienne Marie Brown, Emergent Strategy. She also has a book called, I think it's called Holding Change, about the practice of facilitation, which I have found really useful as dramaturg, educator, all the things that I do. Just Adrienne Marie Brown in general. Anything else on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like LMDA, which is the Literary Managers and Dramaturgs Association, which is always a really great resource to check out. Like they were having they had an emerging dramaturg, like I don't want to call it a support group, but it was like a gathering for emerging dramaturgs to be in community with one another, and one for BIPOC folks and disabled dramaturgs. And so they have a lot of resources, like a job board. I think it may cost something to join, but they also have free resources and information. I also, like, because I didn't have like a traditional dramaturgy upbringing, like I can't point to like specific books, but I think the thing that was most valuable to me was just reading as many plays as possible.
Yes.
The National New Play Network, go on there, read anything and everything that's exciting to you. Like release judgment of like, is this a good play? Is this a bad play? Just read it. It's all informative. Yeah. Any other resources I can think of?
Three Girls Theater is this company that's like been really helpful to me.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Getting me started. Do you have any workshops coming up?
I would say it's very likely to be a workshop in the fall of 2023, and we have not yet secured its place in our calendar.
Yeah.
There you
I have one more last one if there's no more.
go. Go for it.
Any projects you want to plug, socials you want to plug, doesn't have to be about dramaturgy, but just like you're interesting people, so if the audience wants to check you out, this give you have the floor.
I do, but
Go ahead.
okay. I have a show on March 17th and 18th called Edna in a Bottle. It's a sketch comedy show, and we'll be closing out Piano Fight. So sadly, it'll be the last two shows there, and tickets are going to sell out, so get them now. And then April 16th, I will be in my circus improv troupe, Cirque Lié, which means circus yes and French, at Stageworks at 7 p.m. It's a Sunday, and we'll be just doing improv clowning. It's really fun.
I don't know what I'm going to do. So I work with Theater First in Berkeley, and so we're going to be putting up a show, Room, and it's directed by Karina Gutierrez, and written by Marcela Ortiz Trevino, I think. So it's a very exciting play, and I am kind of finding myself being the person putting together the study guide. So, but it's going to be opening in May 5th at Theater First in Berkeley, 1301 Shattuck Avenue. I think it'll be exciting.
I'm working on a couple things, but what I really want to plug is an organization that I'm a part of called Anti-Capitalism for Artists, formed in the pandemic, a political education learning community for artists who are interested in raising class consciousness. And I facilitate an intro to anti-capitalism for artists cohort, along with some of my facilitator comrades. A for A is sort of the acronym that we use. We just won an Obie Award, which is incredible, which came with some grant money, which means we're going to be able to even offer more things. So check out Anti-Capitalism for Artists if you are at all interested in how we, as an artist community, can talking about decolonizing, right? But how we can understand ourselves as workers, what it means to create better working conditions for artists, but also what it means to think about the role of artists and cultural workers in the work of liberation. So yeah, anti-capitalism for artists.
I'm really excited. I am the Director of Artistic Programming and Marketing at Crowded Fire Theater, and we have our Matchbox play reading series, which is a new play development series that's going to be happening in mid-April to early May. And so 4 of the playwrights are part of our Resilience and Development Lab for Black women and femme-identified playwrights who are in this 2-year cycle where they're being supported to write brand new plays. And then we'll be having 2 other playwrights, including Lily Gonzalez's Transformata, which I'm really excited about. It's a play that I read in a literary a play festival that is now getting further development. I'm going to be associate directing The Wizard of Oz at ACT, American Conservatory Theater, which doesn't inherently feel radical, but it's going to just be this queering love letter to the Bay. I never thought I'd be working on The Wizard of Oz in my entire career, but there's those opportunities, right? So I'm really excited about that. That starts I think we start previews at the end of May and open June 8th. And then the last thing is far off, but I'm going to be directing a play that I started as a dramaturg on for Bayer Playwrights Festival, Babes in Holland, by Deneen Reynolds-Knott. And it got postponed due to COVID complications last year, but we're bringing it back to the main stage. And it is a really beautiful love story about 2 young Black women that meet and fall in love in college. But I'm really grateful that that'll be produced by Shotgun Players, but they provided the resources so that we could hire a team of almost entirely emerging artists, all women and femmes of color, pair them with an established mentor, so they're getting some of their first lead designer artist credits, and also getting the support and sounding board that they need. And so it's kind of creating this really exciting pipeline for other artists, which I'm super, super grateful for. And as part of the Theater Bay Area Director's Residency I received in 2021. So yeah, those are the things on Lee's horizon. Yay!